Okay, think about this for a second. A warrior who was never, ever defeated in battle. A leader who never signed away his people's land. And maybe most striking of all, a man whose face was never captured in a photograph. Today, we're diving into the life of one of history's most powerful, most elusive figures, the legendary Lakota war leader, Crazy Horse.
I mean, in our world today, an age of endless images and icons, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, right? A figure this important, leaving no physical trace. But it's true. The man who led one of the most effective resistance movements in American history, we have no confirmed picture of him. His face is a total mystery, just a blank space where a hero's portrait should be.
So that begs the question, doesn't it? How did a man with no image, no portrait, become this immortal symbol of resistance? That's really the heart of what we're looking at today. We're going to uncover the story of how a man became an idea that it turns out couldn't be captured, couldn't be confined, and definitely couldn't be forgotten.
All right, so to really understand the warrior, we've got to go back to the beginning. We have to start with the boy, a quiet, observant kid whose world was about to be turned completely upside down.
So his story starts around 1840 in the Black Hills. And back then, he was known as Curly. By all accounts, he was a shy kid, kind of kept to himself. But his childhood, man, it coincided exactly with this flood of American settlers pushing west. And they brought with them things the Lakota had never seen, new diseases, and a level of violence that just shattered their entire way of life. You know, any hope of maybe living peacefully side by side, that was just blown to pieces early on. When he was just a teenager, around 14, he saw the aftermath of something called the Groton Incident. And then, a year later, he witnessed U.S. troops retaliate by massacring Lakota civilians. For a young kid like Curly, the message couldn't have been clearer. Coexistence was impossible. This was a fight for survival. So, looking for answers, he went out into the wilderness all by himself. And there, he had this incredibly powerful spiritual vision. He saw a rider on a horse, flying through a storm, totally untouched by bullets or arrows, and a voice promised him that he too would be protected in battle. But there was a condition. He had to live humbly, selflessly, and dedicate his life completely to his people. This vision, well, it became his compass. It guided pretty much every single thing he did from that day forward. So, guided by that powerful vision, the quiet boy named Curly transforms. He becomes Crazy Horse, and soon his genius as a warrior and a tactician would become legendary all across the Great Plains. Take the Fetterman fight in 1866. This was just a masterclass in strategy. He orchestrated the perfect ambush. First, he sends out a small group of warriors as decoys, just enough to get the U.S. troops' attention and make them angry. He totally played on their arrogance, baiting them into leaving their fort. Then, the decoys led them right into a perfectly set trap, where hundreds of his warriors were waiting. It was absolute, total annihilation, a pure testament to his tactical brilliance. The number says it all. 81. 81 U.S. casualties. But it was more than just a number. That day, the myth of American military invincibility on the plains was completely shattered. This wasn't just a victory. It was a declaration. A new and seriously formidable leader was on the scene. Okay, so fast forward a bit. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 puts the Lakota at a crossroads, facing a really difficult choice. A lot of the other leaders chose what seemed like the safer option, move on to the reservations. But for Crazy Horse, no way. For him, there was only one path forward. And here's the choice they faced, laid out plain and simple. On one hand, you have agency life. That means dependence on government food, giving up your culture, and ultimately losing your freedom. On the other hand, you have Crazy Horse's path, living free, but with that comes the risk of starvation, constant danger, but you get to preserve your way of life. For him, the choice was obvious. Freedom was worth any price. I mean, this really gets to the core of who he was. For Crazy Horse, freedom was completely non-negotiable. He saw taking those government rations as the first step on a very slippery slope to total submission. He believed it would be the end of the Lakota as a people, and that was a price he was never, ever willing to pay. Now, right at the peak of his influence, a personal scandal erupts. He elopes with another man's wife, and this leads to him being stripped of his formal titles as a leader. But here's the twist. This huge setback actually had an unintended consequence.
It completely freed him from tribal politics, all the meetings and debates, and it allowed him to focus on the one thing he did better than anyone, leading the fight.
And that total commitment to the fight, it all comes to a head in the summer of 1876. It was a season that would see his greatest victories, but also, tragically, sow the seeds of his people's ultimate defeat. First, on June 17th, Crazy Horse is a key player in the Battle of the Rosebud. He helps lead a charge that turns back a huge U.S. Army column under General Crook. This was a massive strategic win because it stopped Crook from meeting up with another army column, and it set the stage for an even bigger showdown. And that showdown came just 8 days later. That other column, led by the infamous and, let's say, overconfident Lieutenant Colonel George Custer, basically stumbles right into the massive Lakota and Cheyenne camp. Crazy Horse was right there, leading a devastating counterattack that completely wiped out Custer's command. We're talking about the Battle of the Little Bighorn, a name that would echo through American history forever. But here's the devastating irony. This incredible, historic victory, it came at a terrible, terrible price. The U.S. government was humiliated, they were enraged, and they unleashed the full, overwhelming power of their military. The new mission? Hunt down every single Lakota and Cheyenne who wasn't on a reservation. Their greatest triumph had just signed their death warrant. So, the celebrations didn't last long. The final chapter of Crazy Horse's life is a grim one. It's a story of being relentlessly hunted, of immense sacrifice, and ultimately of a betrayal that would be more painful than any wound from a soldier. The army hunted them all through a brutal winter. His people were freezing, they were starving. So in the spring of 1877, Crazy Horse makes his last great decision as a leader. He decides to surrender. But you have to understand, this wasn't an act of defeat. It was an act of compassion. He did it to save his people from being wiped out completely. But at the fort, things went horribly wrong. There was this toxic mix of fear from the army, jealousy from other Lakota leaders, and just terrible misunderstandings. A decision was made to arrest him. And in the struggle that followed, and this is the most heartbreaking part, while he was being held back by his own people, a U.S. soldier stabbed him with a bayonet. He was fatally wounded. He didn't die a warrior's death on the battlefield. He died in a place that was supposed to be safe, surrounded by betrayal. And yet, for all that, his spirit was never captured. He remains this incredibly powerful symbol of resistance. A man of deep spiritual conviction, totally devoted to a way of life that simply refused to submit. And in the end, true to his entire life, his parents took his body and buried it in a secret place. To this day, no one knows where his grave is. Which brings us right back to where we started. His grave is a secret. His image is unknown. With no picture to put on a t-shirt and no grave to turn into a tourist spot, Crazy Horse can't be contained. He can't be pinned down as just a historical figure. He exists as something more, as an idea. The idea of uncompromising resistance. So let me leave you with this. What does it mean for a legacy to be an idea? When a person's greatest impact isn't what they left behind, but the untamable spirit they represent?
Welcome to The Debate. Today we are heading to the American West, but I want to be very clear right off the bat. We are stripping away the dime novel mythology. We aren't interested in that whole cowboys and Indians caricature. We are focusing on the high plains in the mid-19th century and a man whose name everyone knows, but whose actual motivations, well, very few people truly understand. We're talking about Tashunke Witko, the Oglala Lakota leader known to history as Crazy Horse.
It really is a name that carries an immense amount of weight. It conjures up this image of the mystic warrior, the brilliant tactician, the man who defeated Custer. He was born around 1840, and for many, he stands as the ultimate uncompromising symbol of resistance against American expansion.
But symbols can be two-dimensional. Today, we want to look at the man himself and the excruciating choices he had to make. So the central question we're debating is one of principle versus pragmatism. Was Crazy Horse's absolute refusal to engage with the American political system a necessary act of moral preservation? I'm going to argue that it was. That his obstructionism, as his enemies called it, was actually the only rational response to a deceitful adversary. He understood that dependence on the U.S. government meant the death of his culture.
And that is exactly where we're going to disagree. I have deep respect for the moral clarity he possessed. It's incredibly compelling. But I look at the outcome. My argument is that Crazy Horse's rigidity, his refusal to play the political game, ultimately isolated him. He committed to a strategy of total warfare and withdrawal at a time when technology and geopolitics were making that lifestyle, well, impossible. His untamed nature made him a legend, yes, but it arguably accelerated the tragedy that destroyed his own people.
I think you're judging 19th century choices with, 21st century hindsight. You're looking at the map and saying he should have known. But let's start at the beginning. To understand why he refused to compromise, you have to understand who he was before he was a war leader. He wasn't born Crazy Horse.
No, and the source material is fascinating on this. He was born Curly or Chowha in the Lakota, and he wasn't the stereotypical boisterous warrior that pop culture might expect. He was described as remarkably shy, almost introverted. He had light hair and a lighter complexion, which already set him apart visually.
Introverted is the key word there. He was an observer. While other boys were engaging in roughhousing, Curly was watching. And what he watched formed a very grim data set. He grew up right as the Oregon Trail was cutting through Lakota territory. He didn't just see settlers, he saw the environmental degradation that came with them. He saw the buffalo herds thinning out along the Platte River. He saw new diseases. He was compiling evidence from a very, very young age.
That is true, but plenty of other Lakota leaders saw the same things, Red Cloud, Spotted Tail, and they drew different conclusions. They decided that because of those changes, they needed to negotiate to secure what they could.
Curly, he drew the exact opposite conclusion. Because of the Gretton incident in 1854, I really don't think we can overstate the impact of this event on a teenage mind. You have a dispute over a stray cow, literally a single cow that wandered into a camp, and this young Lieutenant Grattan marches into a Lakota camp with artillery. He demands the culprit, tensions rise, and he opens fire, killing the chief, conquering Bear. Curly is there. He watches this happen.
It was a massacre and a diplomatic disaster, absolutely. It set the plains on fire.
It was empirical evidence. It taught him that the Americans were volatile, disrespectful of hierarchy, and lethal. The lesson wasn't negotiation is hard. The lesson was negotiation gets your leader killed. And after witnessing that, he retreats into the wilderness. This is where he gets his famous vision, right?
Right. And this vision is critical to my argument about his isolation. He goes on a vision quest and he dreams of a rider floating above the ground. The rider is untouched by bullets or arrows, but there are strict conditions attached to this protection. He has to live humbly. He can't take spoils of war. He can't wear the flashy war bonnets. He has to stand apart from the celebration.
It was a mandate for selflessness. He was serving the people by denying himself.
It was a mandate for loneliness. When he takes his father's name to Shunke Witko, which translates roughly to his horse is crazy or wild, untamed horse, it cements this identity. A wild horse can't be part of the herd in the same way. It implies a creature that breaks norms. This spiritual foundation set him on a path where he couldn't just sit in a council and compromise, because his very spiritual power was derived from not compromising. He trapped himself in a role where flexibility was, in a way, spiritually forbidden. But look at what that no cost him and his followers. By rejecting the treaty and staying in the unceded territories, he essentially removed his voice from the negotiation table. He chose the hard life, the freezing winters in the Powder River country, the hunger over the agency system. He let Red Cloud and Spotted Tail become the voice of the Lakota to Washington.
He chose freedom over a cage. He understood something very technical about sovereignty. Once you eat the government's food, you follow the government's rules. He referred to the agency Indians as wagglets, or loafers. He saw that the agency system was designed to break the warrior culture by making them dependent agrarian farmers. By staying out, he kept the culture alive. He wasn't just preserving land, he was preserving the Lakota soul.
He kept the culture alive in a vacuum, though. While he was freezing in the north, the political reality of the region was being shaped by the men at the agencies. He was operating on a binary setting, total autonomy or nothing. And in geopolitics, binary thinkers usually get crushed.
He was preserving a way of life that required vast hunting grounds, right at the moment those hunting grounds were being fenced off and crisscrossed by railroads.
But the fencing off wasn't a peaceful process, and that brings us to the military dimension. Because you portrayed him earlier as someone who just fought blindly, but that's not accurate at all. He was an innovator.
Oh, I don't deny his tactical genius. The record is clear on that. He was brilliant in the saddle.
So let's look at the Fetterman fight in 1866. This is during Red Cloud's War. Up until this point, the U.S. Army had a certain arrogance. They thought a disciplined volley of fire would scatter any tribal force. Crazy Horse, he deconstructed that assumption. He didn't just charge, he acted as a decoy. He rode out, taunted the soldiers, feigned injury, and lured Captain Fetterman, a man who boasted he could ride through the whole Sioux Nation with 80 men, into a perfectly laid trap.
It was a masterclass in guerrilla warfare. He used the terrain and the enemy's own psychological arrogance against them. He understood exactly what buttons to push to make Fetterman break formation.
Exactly. He annihilated the detachment. This wasn't a skirmish. It was a total victory. It proves that his uncompromising stance wasn't just stubbornness. It was backed by the capability to enforce it. He proved that the U.S. military could be beaten in the field. This validates his position that resistance was a viable option, not just a symbolic one.
He proved they could be beaten in that specific field, with that specific technology. But this is where the pragmatism side of the debate comes in. The Fetterman fight was in 1866, but look at what happens just a short time later, specifically the wagon box fight in 1867.
A much less successful engagement, admittedly.
It wasn't just less successful, it was a paradigmatic shift. The technology changed. The U.S. troops received new breech-loading Springfield rifles. Suddenly, they could fire, reload, and fire again in seconds without standing up to use a ramrod. The rate of fire increased exponentially. The shock tactics that worked on Fetterman, that mass charge to overwhelm the enemy while they reloaded, they just stopped working. The source material implies Crazy Horse realized this. He saw the bodies pile up. He saw that bravery couldn't beat mechanics.
He knew the odds were shifting. He wasn't blind.
He knew, as the texts say, that time was working against his people. And this is my critique. If a leader recognizes that the enemy has an industrial advantage that neutralizes your primary tactic, and that the enemy has infinite reinforcements while you have finite warriors, is it not a failure of strategy to continue seeking a military solution?
So what was the alternative? Surrender? Just give up because the gun is better?
Diplomacy. Adaptation. Red Cloud stopped fighting. He transitioned to a diplomatic war to hold on to the reservation land. Crazy Horse kept escalating. He was fighting a war of attrition against an industrial power. That is a suicidal strategy. You cannot shoot your way out of the Industrial Revolution.
It would be suicidal if the diplomatic option was real, but it wasn't. You keep pointing into Red Cloud's path as the smart one, but look at the Black Hills. The 1868 treaty, the one Red Cloud signed, guaranteed that land to the Lakota in perpetuity as long as the grass grows. Then Custer finds gold in 1874, and what happens? Does the government respect the treaty? No. They offer to buy it. When the Lakota say no, the government just stops enforcing the border against miners and issues an ultimatum. Come into the agencies or be deemed hostile.
That was a clear violation of the treaty. I agree. It was a betrayal.
It was theft. So when you ask why he kept fighting, it's because the diplomatic off-ramp led to the same cliff. The U.S. proved Crazy Horse right. Their promises were worthless. So he fought at the Battle of the Rosebud in 1876, and again, he wins. He checks General Crook's advance. He wasn't just a guerrilla fighter picking off stragglers. He was maneuvering large bodies of cavalry and halting a major U.S. offensive. He proved he could still win on the battlefield, even with the technology gap, if the tactics were right.
The Battle of the Rosebud was his strategic masterpiece, arguably more so than Little Bighorn. I'll grant you that. But we have to look at the internal cost of this leadership style. You paint him as the unified voice of resistance, but within his own tribe, he was incredibly divisive.
Great leaders often are.
You don't make history by making everyone comfortable.
But this wasn't just about policy. It was about conduct. We need to discuss the incident with Black Buffalo Woman. This happened around 1870. He falls in love with a married woman, and they elope. Now, Lakota society had rules for divorce, but the way Crazy Horse handled this, ignoring the husband, No Water, caused a massive scandal. No Water shoots Crazy Horse in the face. He survives, obviously, but the scar remains.
A tragic domestic dispute. It happens.
It was a political earthquake. Crazy Horse wasn't just a warrior. He was a shirt wearer, an Agul Tunka Una. This was a supreme civil leader, a protector of the people. The shirt wearers were held to an incredibly high standard of conduct. Because of this scandal, the elders stripped him of his shirt. They took away his civil authority.
They did. But I would argue that was the best thing that could have happened to him.
How can losing your authority be a good thing?
Because it liberated him from the bureaucracy. The role of a shirt wearer is about consensus, peacekeeping within the tribe, looking after the widows. It's a constraint. It requires you to be a politician. When he lost the shirt, he was no longer bound by the slow consensus-based politics of the council. He was free to be purely a war leader. It allowed him to focus 100% on the existential threat. He didn't need the shirt to lead. Men followed him because of his power, not his rank.
But is a total commitment to warfare what a nation needs? By stripping away those civil responsibilities, he became unmoored. He prioritized his personal will, his love affair, over the stability of the community. And then, by becoming purely a war leader, he started to alienate the other chiefs. They respected him, but they also feared him.
They feared him because he held them to a standard they couldn't meet.
Or they feared him because he was becoming a dictator of sorts. The source material mentions that in the final days, his soldier societies, the Akichita, were actually forcing people to stay in the camp and not surrender. They were slashing the tents of anyone who tried to leave for the agencies. That's not leadership, that's coercion. He was holding his own people hostage to his vision of resistance.
In an existential crisis, you need discipline. If you have a leak in the boat, you plug it. He was trying to keep the nation together. And look at the results. June 1876, Little Bighorn, the greasy grass. The tribes gather, Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho. It's the largest gathering of warriors on the plains. When Custer attacks, Crazy Horse leads the counterattack. He doesn't need a title or a shirt, he has the respect of the young men. He leads the flanking maneuver that seals Custer's fate. That victory was possible because he was an uncompromising war leader.
And that victory was the beginning of the end.
How so? It was the greatest victory in the history of the Indian Wars.
Because it woke the giant. Before Little Bighorn, the U.S. public was tired of Indian wars. It was the centennial year. They wanted peace. After Custer was wiped out, the demand for retribution was overwhelming. The army flooded the zone. The victory at Little Bighorn ensured that the U.S. would stop at nothing to crush the Lakota. A more pragmatic leader might have seen that wiping out a U.S. regiment would bring down the wrath of the entire nation.
So he should have let Custer attack the village? Let them kill the women and children just to keep the PR manageable?
No, obviously not. He had to defend the camp. But the strategic rigidity is the problem. He won the battle, but he had no plan for the war. After the battle, the tribes dispersed. The winter came. The buffalo were gone, hunted to near extinction by commercial hunters, which was another form of economic warfare Crazy Horse couldn't shoot his way out of. He won the day, but lost the future.
The starvation is what beat him, not the soldiers.
Exactly. And that brings us to the surrender in 1877. This is the moment that tests your theory of principle.
I think it vindicates it. He didn't surrender because he was afraid to die. He surrendered because his people were eating their own ponies to survive. He walked into Fort Robinson not as a defeated man, but as a man making a transaction, his freedom for their lives. It aligns perfectly with that childhood vision of humility. He sacrificed the thing he loved most, his wildness, his freedom, to save the people. It was the ultimate act of a shirt wearer, even without the shirt.
It is a noble interpretation, but look at the reception he got. He comes into the agency and the atmosphere is toxic. It's not just the Americans who are wary of him, it's his own people. Red Cloud and Spotted Tail, the leaders who had compromised earlier, they viewed him as a threat to their own power. They spread rumors that he was planning to assassinate General Crook.
Lies. Pure political assassination by men who were jealous of his standing. They knew that as long as Crazy Horse breathed, he was the true leader of the people.
Perhaps, but it proves my point about isolation. Because Crazy Horse had spent years outside the system, refusing to build political alliances, refusing to engage in the messy work of agency politics, he had no friends when he came in. He was a celebrity to the warriors, but a liability to the chiefs. He had no diplomatic immunity, so to speak. He didn't know how to play the game, and the game ate him alive.
He had his integrity.
Integrity doesn't stop a bayonet. And that's the tragedy of his death. September 1877, he is arrested, largely due to mistranslations and paranoia. He realizes he's being put in a guardhouse, a cage, and he fights back. And who holds him down?
Little big man, his own friend, a man who had fought beside him.
His own lieutenant. He is restrained by his own people while an American soldier stabs him. That image is devastating. It implies that his uncompromising nature didn't just make him an enemy of the state, it made him incompatible with the survival strategies of his own kin. He was too radical for the reality they were forced to live in. They had to hold him down to survive.
I interpret that moment differently. I see it as the system proving its illegitimacy one last time. They couldn't handle a free man. Even when he surrendered, they had to cage him. And in that moment of death, he escaped them. He refused to be imprisoned.
He died on the floor of an adjutant's office. It's a gritty, ugly end.
But consider the burial. This is the final act of the story. His parents take the body, they put it on a travois, and carry it into the Badlands. They bury him in a secret location. To this day, nobody knows where Tashunke Witko lies.
It is a powerful mystery.
It is a victory. Think about it. In a world where the U.S. government cataloged everything, counted every Indian, measured every acre of land, put every name on a census, they could not capture Crazy Horse. Even in death, he refused to be a statistic. He returned to the earth on his own terms. That untamed spirit remained free.
Symbolically, yes. It is a profound ending. It creates the myth. But symbols don't feed families. I can't help but look at the aftermath. The Lakota were confined to reservations. The culture was systematically attacked. Would a more pragmatic Crazy Horse, one who used his immense influence to negotiate earlier, perhaps after the Fetterman fight, have secured a better deal? Maybe a larger reservation, maybe better rations.
Or maybe he would have just been another broken chief, signing away land for promises that would be broken a year later. Look at Red Cloud. He lived a long life on the reservation, but he watched his people stripped of their dignity. Crazy Horse spared himself that slow death.
But he left his people leaderless in their darkest hour. That is the burden of the martyr. You get the glory of the clean conscience, but you leave the mess for others to clean up.
I think we're reaching the core of the disagreement here.
I think so.
To me, Crazy Horse represents the absolute value of resistance. He teaches us that there are some things, freedom, culture, dignity, that cannot be bartered. If he had compromised, he would be just another historical footnote. By refusing to submit, he gave his people a psychological victory that has outlasted the military defeat. He showed that you can be overpowered, but you don't have to be conquered.
And I see him as a figure of profound tragedy. He was a man of immense talent, brilliant, brave, visionary, who was trapped by his own virtues. The very things that made him great, his refusal to bend, his adherence to the old ways, rendered him unable to navigate the new world that was crashing down on him. He is a hero, absolutely, but he is a warning too. A warning that when the world changes fundamentally, total resistance often leads to total destruction.
It's the eternal question. Is it better to survive in chains or die free?
Or is the true challenge to find a way to break the chains without dying? That's the path he couldn't find.
You found a path that ascended above the chains.
The complexity of his life, from the shy boy Curly watching the Oregon Trail to the disgraced lover, to the warrior who broke Custer. It's a story that demands we look closer. He isn't just a face on a t-shirt or a monument in the rock. He was a man wrestling with impossible odds.
And perhaps in the end, the fact that we are still debating his choices 150 years later is proof that he won the battle from memory.
That is something we can agree on.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening to The Debate
by Huki Witko. I just want everyone listening to just sit with that sound for a moment. Tashuki Witko.
It's powerful.
It is. And for most of us, that name in its original Lakota, it might sound completely foreign, maybe a little distant, but if I give you the English translation, crazy horse.
It's instantaneous. The image just floods right in.
Right. It's immediate. You probably see that massive mountain monument, the one that's still being blasted out of the rock in South Dakota.
Oh, you think of the battle, Little Bighorn, the dust, the chaos, Custer.
Exactly. Or, maybe it's just that general archetype, the stoic, fierce warrior, feathers in his hair, riding a stallion across the Great Plains.
It's a name that carries so much weight. It feels almost mythical. Like he's more of a legend, a spirit, than an actual guy made of flesh and blood.
And that right there, that is the exact problem we run into with historical figures of this magnitude, isn't it?
It's always the problem. The myth just swallows the man whole. We see the statue, we might buy the t-shirt with the warrior on it, but we lose all the nuance. We lose the actual breathing human being who was living through these earth-shattering changes.
And what's so fascinating about the source material we're looking at today, the untamed spirit of Crazy Horse, is that it just takes a sledgehammer to that two-dimensional image.
It really does.
That's our mission today. We're going to try to move beyond the poster on the wall. We want to understand who this person actually was.
And the source paints a picture of someone. Well, incredibly complex.
It's so complex. We are not talking about a guy who was, born a screaming, bloodthirsty warrior. Not at all. We are talking about a shy, observant child. His name was Curly.
Can you imagine? From Curly to Crazy Horse.
It's an incredible journey. And we're going to trace his evolution from that quiet kid into a military genius who literally shattered the myth of American military invincibility. It is a journey from silence to thunder.
And we absolutely have to place this story in its proper context. This is non-negotiable. You just can't understand Crazy Horse without understanding the world that was literally collapsing around him. We're looking at the mid-19th century American West.
And this isn't a setting for a cowboy movie.
No. This is a collision zone, a full-on collision of cultures.
So paint that picture for us. What does that collision actually look like on the ground for these people?
It's almost apocalyptic from their perspective. You have this rapid, unstoppable expansion of American settlers. You have the gold rush, which is driving people into territories they'd never even seen on a map before.
Right.
And you have a post-Civil War military machine that, it suddenly has no one left to fight in the South. So it turns its eyes and its cannons westward.
It's an existential threat to the Lakota way of life.
Absolutely. This wasn't just a border dispute or an argument over, taxes or something. This was a fundamental question of whether their entire civilization would continue to exist.
So you have this incredibly high-stakes backdrop, basically the end of the world as the Lakota knew it, and right in the center of it all is this figure who is, arguably one of the most enigmatic leaders in history. And the source material covers everything. His early life, a really profound spiritual vision that basically dictated his future, his tactical brilliance, even a scandalous love life that nearly ruined him.
I was hoping we'd get to that part.
Oh, we're definitely getting to that. And then finally, his mysterious and really tragic death. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, because we are diving deep into the life of the untamed spirit.
Let's do it. Let's start at the very, very beginning. I think the childhood of historical icons is so often where you find the key that unlocks their adult behavior.
I agree.
And for Crazy Horse, the source notes, he was born around 1840 in the Black Hills, but he wasn't Crazy Horse then.
No, he was Curly. And the source makes a point of saying he had, lighter colored curly hair and a lighter complexion than most of the other Lakota kids, which is where the name came from. But I love the personality detail here. He wasn't the stereotypical alpha male kid, not the one leading the pack and wrestling everyone to the ground.
No.
The source describes him as shy, observant. He kind of stood apart from the other boys.
And that idea of standing apart is so crucial. In a society that's so highly valued communal activity, storytelling, boisterous bravery, being the quiet one on the edge of the camp is a really distinct personality trait.
It suggests a level of introspection.
A deep introspection that you don't always associate with these action heroes, you know. But think about what that does for a developing mind.
Well, if you aren't talking, you're listening.
You're not just listening, you're watching.
Right.
If you are the quiet one, you are the watching one.
Yeah.
You're observing patterns, you're seeing how things work while everyone else is just making noise.
I was just thinking that. While the other boys are roughhousing, Curly is watching how the horses move. He's watching the body language of the elders. He's scanning the horizon.
It's like the classic introvert advantage. It's so easy to overlook the quiet kid in the back of the classroom.
But they're the ones absorbing everything.
Everything. And the expert insight from our source material suggests that this kind of outsider status likely sharpened his observational skills. And later on, when we get to his military strategy, that ability to read a situation, to see what others miss, that becomes his superpower.
It really does.
Precisely. I mean, strategy is just observation applied to conflict. But here's the thing. Observation alone doesn't make a warrior. There has to be a catalyst. There has to be a moment where the world shifts and the observer decides they have to act.
The point of no return.
Exactly. For Curly, that catalyst came in 1854.
The Grattan incident. Now, I've read about this before, and honestly, every time I revisit it, it just seems so avoidable.
It's absurd.
It's tragic, but it's also absurd. The source pairs this with the massacre at Blue Water Creek as the real turning point. But let's zoom in on Grattan. What actually happened there?
It is absurd.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking, really. It all started with a cow.
A cow.
One single cow. It was stray, it belonged to a Mormon wagon train, and it wandered into a Lakota camp. The people in the camp were hungry. Rations from the fort were late. Game was getting scarce. So they did what you do when you're hungry and a cow wanders into your camp.
He ate it.
They ate it.
Okay, so a cow gets eaten. In the grand scheme of things on the American frontier, this feels like a minor property dispute. You pay the guy for the cow, shake hands, move on.
And that is exactly what the Lakota chief, Conquering Bear, tried to do. He was a man of peace. He offered a horse in exchange for the cow. He offered money. He was trying to de-escalate. But the U.S. officer in charge of the nearby detachment was Lieutenant John Grattan. He was young, fresh out of West Point, and completely full of himself, just brimming with arrogance.
Oh, I can picture this guy.
He had this belief that he could march into the Sioux Nation with a handful of men and just dictate terms. He didn't want payment for the cow. He wanted the specific man who shot the cow handed over for punishment.
So let me get this straight. He marches a small detachment of soldiers, maybe 30 men,
About that, yeah.
into a massive Lakota encampment, surrounded by hundreds, maybe thousands of warriors, and demands they hand someone over a cow.
That is exactly what happened. Grattan marched in with his men, he set up his artillery, and he started making demands. The interpreter he brought was also drunk, which didn't help.
Of course he was.
Conquering Bear kept trying to negotiate, to be reasonable, but Grattan lost his patience. He gave an order, his men fired, and they killed Conquering Bear.
And I'm going to assume that didn't end well for Lieutenant Grattan.
It ended in minutes. The Lakota warriors, seeing their respected peace chief murdered in front of them, they just erupted. They wiped out Grattan and his entire command.
But for a young boy like Curly who was there, who was witnessing this, the lesson wasn't about the victory, was it?
Not at all. The lesson was about the nature of the enemy.
It just shatters the social contract, doesn't it? It proves that these new people, these soldiers, they can't be reasoned with. They will kill a respected leader over a stray animal.
Exactly. And then the retaliation from the U.S. side was swift and brutal. General Harney came in a year later at Blue Water Creek and just massacred a camp. Men, women, children. Indiscriminate.
And Curly saw that too.
The source says he walked through the aftermath of that attack. He saw the bodies. He saw the destruction.
That is a terrifying realization for a teenager. To look at this overwhelming force coming into your land and to understand, okay, there's no talking our way out of this. There is no sharing.
There's no compromise.
It wasn't a choice born out of aggression, like he woke up one day wanting a fight. It was a choice born of survival, of witnessing unbelievable trauma.
And that level of trauma, it demands a response. You can't just bottle that up. In Lakota culture, as in so many indigenous cultures, when you're faced with these insurmountable questions, when your world is breaking apart,
you seek spiritual guidance.
You go to the wilderness. You seek a vision.
The vision quest. This is one of my favorite parts of his story because it explains so much about his unique style later on. And it's not just, he had a dream. It's a rigorous physical process.
Oh, it's an ordeal.
Can you walk us through what that actually looks like?
Curly retreats into the wilderness.
Yeah.
He goes up into the hills, completely isolated, no food, no water, for days on end. You're pushing your body to the absolute limit.
To break down the barriers between the physical and the spiritual.
Exactly. To open your mind to the Wakantanka, the Great Spirit. And in this state of deprivation and meditation, he has a powerful, vivid vision.
And the vision isn't just a simple prophecy like, you're going to be a great hero. It came with conditions. It came with fine print.
The vision was fascinating because it was so conditional. It promised him spiritual protection, yes, that he couldn't be harmed in battle by bullets or arrows.
Which is an incredible promise.
An incredible promise. But there were strict rules attached to this protection. He had to live humbly. He had to be selfless. He could never take anything for himself. No spoils of war.
Right. It wasn't, you're going to be a great king and have all the gold and all the horses. It was the opposite. It was, you will be protected, but you cannot fight for glory. You cannot fight for personal gain.
Which is a profound constraint for warrior culture, where status was often displayed through what you captured. The number of horses, the weapons you took.
The stories you could tell about your exploits.
Right. High-ranking warriors wore these elaborate war bonnets. They boasted of their coups. This vision dictated that Crazy Horse couldn't take part in any of the usual victory laps. He couldn't brag. He couldn't accumulate wealth. He had to serve the people.
It transforms his motivation from personal ambition to absolute duty.
Completely. He wasn't fighting for himself anymore. He was an instrument, a vessel for the defense of his people.
So he comes back from this quest. He starts proving himself in battle, following this new humble code. And his father, who is also named Crazy Horse, grants him his own name.
This is where Curly fades away.
And he becomes Dashige Witko, Crazy Horse. Now, I've heard people say the name means his horse is crazy, or that it implies he's unstable or erratic.
That's a common misunderstanding.
But the source says the meaning is much closer to a wild, untamed horse.
Untamed is the best way to think about it. And think about the symbolism of a wild horse on that landscape. It's something that refuses the saddle. It refuses the bridle. It kicks and bites and runs free.
You can't be broken.
It cannot be broken. And given that he had just concluded that coexistence with the settlers who wanted to break the Lakota way of life was impossible, the name fits perfectly.
It's not just a cool nickname.
No, as a statement of political and spiritual intent. He would remain wild. He would remain untamed.
It sets the stage so perfectly for the next phase of his life. He has the motivation from the trauma he witnessed. He has the spiritual foundation from his vision. And now he has the name.
But let's be real.
Yeah.
Courage and a cool name, they don't win wars against a modernized industrial army. You need brains. You need strategy.
And this is where we need to unpack section 2 of our outline, the intellectual warrior.
This is where we really have to dismantle that old Hollywood stereotype of the savage warrior who just, charges blindly into battle screaming war cries.
That's not him.
That is not Crazy Horse. He was an intellectual. He was a tactician. He studied warfare the way a chess grandmaster studies the board.
And we see this most clearly during the conflicts over the Bozeman Trail, specifically the Fetterman fight in 1866.
Yes, 1866. So the Civil War is over in the East. The U.S. military is turning its massive industrial machine to the West. They're feeling very, very confident.
And then they run into Crazy Horse. Tell us about the Fetterman fight, because the source describes this not just as a battle, but as a masterpiece, a strategy.
It was a calculated trap, a masterclass in psychology and terrain. You have Captain William Fetterman, another one of these U.S. officers who famously boasted about how easily he could handle the indigenous threat.
He had a quote, didn't he?
He did. He said, "Give me 80 men and I can ride through the whole Sioux Nation."
History is just full of people saying, watch this, and then immediately regretting it.
It really is. Fetterman was arrogant.
Yeah.
He completely believed the myth of American military invincibility.
Yeah.
And Crazy Horse used that arrogance against him.
No.
Well, he knew that if the Lakota just lined up and charged a fortified position like Fort Phil Kearny, they'd be cut down by the rifles. So they had to draw the soldiers out. They had to make them leave the safety of the fort.
The decoy strategy.
The decoy strategy. And this requires immense discipline. You have to understand, the Lakota warriors were brave. They were eager to fight, telling them to hide behind a ridge and just wait silently while the enemy is right there. That's hard.
It's like telling a football team to stand still on the field and let the other team get close. It goes against every instinct.
Every instinct.
Right.
But Crazy Horse organized it. He had hundreds, maybe over 1,000 warriors hidden in the ravines and behind the ridges. Then he himself, along with a few others, rode out.
But they didn't charge.
No, they acted. Well, the source describes it as them acting pathetic.
Pathetic.
They feigned weakness. Crazy Horse would ride close to the fort, then pretend his horse was lame or tired. He would act like he was scared, retreating slowly, stopping, looking back. He stayed just out of effective rifle range, taunting them.
So he's baiting the hook.
He is basically saying, I'm right here. I'm weak. I'm an easy target. Come and get me.
Imagine the nerve that takes. To have bullets whizzing past your head and your job is to act like you're stumbling and scared, suppressing every single instinct to either charge or run away at full speed.
You're managing the gap. It's an art.
And Fetterman takes the bait.
Hook, line, and sinker. He takes his 80 men and charges out of the fort against orders to pursue this small, pathetic group of warriors.
And Crazy Horse leads them on a chase.
Leads him on a perfect chase. He lures Fetterman's detachment over a specific Ridge Lodge trail ridge. And the key is, once the soldiers crossed that ridge, they were out of sight of the fort. No one could see them. No one could help them. They were isolated.
The trap snapped shut.
That's when Crazy Horse gave the signal.
Oh.
And the hidden warriors rose up from the tall grass, from the gullies. It was overwhelming. Fetterman's entire detachment, 81 men, was wiped out in about 20 or 30 minutes.
Every single man.
Every single one. And the source makes it clear this victory absolutely shattered that myth of invincibility. It proved that the Lakota could defeat an organized, equipped U.S. military unit through superior tactics.
It wasn't about numbers. It was about outthinking them.
It must have been a massive shock to the system back in Washington.
It forced a complete rethink of policy on the plains. But, and this is where the story gets so nuanced and where I think this deep dive really matters, Crazy Horse wasn't just celebrating blindly.
No.
Even in this massive victory he was observing, he was still that quiet kid watching, and he noticed something terrifying about the enemy.
The technology.
Yes.
Specifically, the introduction of repeating rifles.
Okay, for those of us who aren't, firearms historians, why is this distinction so important? A gun's a gun, isn't it?
Oh, not in this era. It's a whole different ball game. The standard weapon for a long time was the muzzleloader. Think of the Revolutionary War style rifle.
Okay.
You fire one shot. Then you have to stand the butt of the rifle on the ground, pour gunpowder down the barrel, drop a lead ball in, ram it all down with a rod, put a percussion cap on.
Yeah.
It takes 20, maybe 30 seconds if you're really, really fast.
And in the middle of a battle, 30 seconds is an eternity.
It's a lifetime. And that 30-second pause, that was the Lakota window. That was the moment a warrior on a fast pony could close the distance and use a lance or a bow or a war club. The whole rhythm of battle was fire, applause, fight.
But the repeating rifle changed that rhythm completely.
It destroyed the rhythm.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Henry rifle, the Spencer, later the Winchester. You have a tube or a magazine full of bullets. You just work the lever, clack, clack, and you're ready to fire again.
So there's no pause.
There is no pause. You can fire 15, 16 rounds in the time it takes to reload the muzzleloader just once. There's no window to charge. It's just a continuous wall of lead.
That changes everything. It's like bringing a machine gun to a knife fight.
It is.
Yeah.
And the source makes a point of this. Crazy Horse realized that courage alone wasn't enough against this. That is a hard, bitter pill to swallow for a warrior.
You can be the bravest man on earth, you can have the best spiritual protection, but if the other guy can fire 16 times without stopping, the math is just bad.
The math is brutal. And this is a moment of what you could call tragic foresight. The expert analysis in our source really highlights his intelligence here.
Yeah.
He wasn't in denial. He didn't just say, oh, we need to have more faith or our medicine is stronger.
No, he was a realist.
He was a complete realist. He looked at the repeating rifles and understood that, as the source puts it, time was working against his people. He knew that every year the technology would get better and the numbers of settlers would only increase.
That adds such a heavy layer to his resistance, doesn't it? He's fighting and he's winning these incredible battles like the Fetterman fight, but in the back of his mind, he knows the clock is ticking.
It's not a battle for conquest anymore. It's a battle for time. It's a delaying action against what he sees as the inevitable.
And that grim realization, it leads directly to the big political decisions he makes next. Because if time is short and the threat is total, then you cannot compromise. Which brings us to the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty.
Right. Section 3 in our outline, the politics of freedom. So after the Fetterman fight and other victories, the U.S. government is spooked. They realize they can't just bully their way through the Powder River country.
Sure, they try to make a deal.
They try to make a deal, the Fort Laramie Treaty. And this caused a huge, painful divide among the Lakota leaders. It wasn't a simple decision.
It's the classic peace versus freedom debate, isn't it? What was the government offering?
They basically said, stop fighting us, stop attacking the trails, move on to these designated agencies, what we now call reservations. If you do that, we will provide you with food, we'll give you blankets, tools, and we'll protect you.
You'll be safe.
You'll be safe. And you have to sympathize with the leaders who signed it. You really do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the buffalo were already disappearing. European diseases were rampant. The military pressure was constant. For many leaders, this treaty looked like the only way to ensure the biological survival of their families.
It was a pragmatic choice, a heartbreaking pragmatic choice. Accept dependence to keep your children alive.
But Crazy Horse, he looked at that deal and saw something else entirely.
He saw a trap.
He said no. Not just no, but it was a categorical refusal.
He refused to even touch the pen. He equated dependence on government rations with the death of the soul. His logic was simple, and it was absolute. If you have to wait in line for someone else to feed you, you are no longer a free person.
You're a subject.
You're a subject, you're a pet. Your life is no longer your own.
So he takes what the source calls the hard path. He gathers his followers, the ones who agree with him, and he leads them north into the harsh, remote territories away from the agencies.
And let's just pause for a second on what that actually means. It sounds romantic in a movie. He chose the hard path. But in reality, it meant embracing hunger. It meant freezing winters in the Powder River country without the guaranteed beef and flour the agency Indians were getting.
It meant no coffee, no sugar, no metal tools unless you could trade for them.
It meant constant danger, not just from the army, but from other rival tribes like the Crow. He was asking his followers to choose starvation and cold over subjugation.
That is a massive, massive ask. Imagine being a parent in that band. You're looking at your hungry kids, the snow is piling up outside the tipi, and you know for a fact that if you just rode south for a few days to the agency, there is food waiting for you.
But you don't. You stay with Crazy Horse in the snow because you believe in the principle of autonomy more than you fear the cold.
It really challenges you, as the listener, to consider the weight of that choice. We live in a world that is so obsessed with security and comfort. We insure everything. We want guarantees. We want 2 days shipping on our survival.
And Crazy Horse looked at safety and saw a cage. He preferred the danger of the wilderness because at least there, he was the master of his own fate.
It's such a powerful definition of freedom. Freedom isn't just about doing what you want. It's the willingness to endure suffering to maintain your sovereignty.
Well said. But as we move into section 4, we see that even a man of this immense discipline, this incredible principle, he is not immune to the chaos of human emotion.
He's still a man.
He's still a man. And we have to talk about the scandal.
The elopement. This feels like a plot twist in a drama series, but it's real history. For all his focus and his stoicism, Crazy Horse falls in love.
He does. And this is where the perfect hero image gets a few cracks in it, which I think makes him more real, more relatable. He falls for a woman named Black Buffalo Woman.
And cue the dramatic music. She was already married.
She was. To a man named No Water. Now, in Lakota society, divorce was possible. It wasn't like Victorian England where you were stuck for life. But there was a protocol. There were proper channels. There was a way to do things.
And I'm guessing Crazy Horse didn't fill out the proper paperwork.
He did not. He and Black Buffalo Woman just eloped. They ran off together while he was supposed to be leading a war party. It was impulsive, it was passionate, and it was a massive transgression of social norms.
It's messy. It's a human drama, a soap opera playing out in the middle of this existential war, and it had violent consequences.
It did. No, Water wasn't going to let this go. He tracked them down. He found the tipi where they were staying. He walked in, and he pulled a pistol.
And he shot him.
He shot Crazy Horse in the face.
In the face. Wow.
The bullet entered just below the nostril, and it fractured his upper jaw. It wasn't fatal, obviously, but it was close. And it left a scar on his face that he carried for the rest of his life.
A physical mark of his transgression.
Exactly. But the physical wound, as bad as it was, wasn't the worst part, was it?
No. The political fallout was huge.
It was devastating for him. At the time, Crazy Horse was a shirt wearer. This is a specific, very high-status title.
It's a formal leadership role, a very formal one. Think of it like being a mix of a senator and a Supreme Court justice. You are a protector of the people. You are supposed to be above petty disputes. You are a peacemaker.
And stealing another man's wife is the opposite of being a peacemaker.
It caused so much chaos and division in the camp that the elders had no choice. They stripped him of his shirt. They took away his title.
He was fired. He was disgraced.
Publicly. For a man who lived by such a strict code of personal honor, this must have been deeply humiliating. He lost his formal standing in the tribe.
But and here's the incredible paradox that the source highlights. This disgrace, this public humiliation, might have been exactly what he needed for the battles to come.
It's a fascinating irony.
How so? How does getting fired from your leadership position make you better?
Well, think about the job description of a shirtwearer. It involves a lot of diplomacy. It involves mediating disputes. It involves listening to people complain about their neighbors. It's logistics. It is a heavy bureaucratic burden.
So by stripping him of that title,
the tribe inadvertently freed him. Ah, I see it now. He didn't have to be the politician anymore.
exactly, he was no longer bound by the heavy expectations and duties of civil leadership. He could focus entirely, 100%, on what he was naturally gifted at, warfare and defense. The disgrace allowed him to commit totally to the role of the warrior. It unintentionally sharpened him for the great war that was coming.
So he's an outcast in a way, but a liberated, dangerous one. He's free from the council meetings, free from the politics, and just focused on the survival of his people against the external threat.
And that threat was about to explode.
Gold.
It always comes back to gold, doesn't it?
It really does. So in 1874, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer leads an expedition into the Black Hills.
The Pahasapa, the Sacred Heart of Lakota territory.
And he confirms there's gold in the hills. Now, under the 1868 treaty, the one the government signed, and many Lakota leaders agreed to, the Black Hills belonged to the Lakota. Exclusively. No white man was supposed to be there.
But the moment the newspapers back east screamed gold, that treaty was effectively just paper in the wind.
Thousands of miners flooded in illegally.
A tidal wave of them. And the government, instead of enforcing their own treaty and kicking the miners out, just tried to buy the hills.
The Lakota refused to sell their most sacred land.
Of course they did. So the government issued an ultimatum. Every Lakota, every Cheyenne had to report to the agencies by January 31st, 1876, or be considered hostile and hunted down by the army.
Which brings us to 1876, the Great Sioux War. This is the climax of our story. And usually when people talk about this war, they skip straight to Custer and the Little Bighorn.
They do. It's a mistake.
Because the source emphasizes that we absolutely need to talk about the Battle of the Rosebud first.
The Battle of the Rosebud is crucial. It happened just a week before Little Bighorn. You had General George Crook, one of the best, most experienced Indian fighters in the entire army, marching north with a massive column.
He was part of a three-pronged attack plan, right,
Yeah.
to corner the hostiles.
Exactly. He was supposed to link up with Custer and General Terry, but Crazy Horse intercepted him.
And this wasn't just a small hit-and-run raid.
No, not at all. Crazy Horse fought a pitched battle for hours. He maneuvered his warriors, he countered Crook's movements, he charged and retreated. He fought Crook to a standstill and forced him to turn back and retreat.
This is strategically huge.
It's a whole bowl game. By taking Crook's entire column out of the fight, Crazy Horse ensured that when Custer found the village days later, Custer was alone. There was no backup coming for him.
So Rosebud sets the stage perfectly for Little Bighorn, and then we have the main event. June 25, 1876, the Greasy Grass, as the Lakota call it, Custer's last stand.
We've all seen the paintings. Custer with his long hair, pistols blazing, fighting to the last man.
Hey, let's look at it from the perspective of our source. It wasn't just a chaotic brawl, it was a strategy, it was an encirclement.
It was the culmination of everything Crazy Horse had learned. The observation from his childhood, the decoy tactics from the Fetterman fight, the brilliant use of terrain.
And he wasn't the only leader there.
No, you had other great leaders like Gall and Two Moons, and of course the spiritual inspiration of Sitting Bull. But Crazy Horse is credited with leading a massive flanking maneuver that came in from the north and cut off Custer's only path of retreat.
They orchestrated the complete and total destruction of Custer's immediate command.
It was the greatest victory of the Plains Indians against the U.S. military ever. A total, undeniable victory.
And this is maybe the most tragic part of the whole story. The source notes a very dark turning point here. It says, winning the battle accelerated losing the war.
It's the tragedy of success.
That is such a heavy so what moment. Explain that.
By wiping out Custer, who is a national celebrity, a decorated Civil War hero, they didn't just win a battle. They poked the bear. They enraged the American public and the government.
It was 1876, the centennial year.
The country wanted a massive celebration of its 100th birthday, and instead they got the news that one of their most famous soldiers had been wiped out.
So the gloves came off.
Completely off. The U.S. government poured unimaginable resources into the West. They didn't just send more soldiers, they sent the whole industrial machine. They hunted the Lakota relentlessly, all through the brutal winter that followed.
They called it a winter campaign.
They burned the grass so the Lakota ponies had nothing to eat. They attacked camps in the dead of winter when people were most vulnerable. They didn't try to beat them in battle anymore. They tried to starve them out, to freeze them into submission.
The victory at Little Bighorn didn't secure their freedom, it guaranteed their destruction.
Exactly. And that leads us to the surrender. May 1877. This breaks my heart every single time I read about it. Crazy Horse, the man who said he would never submit, who chose the hard path, the untamed spirit, finally rides in to the Red Cloud Agency to surrender.
But the motivation is key here. It's so important. He didn't surrender because he was beaten in a battle. He didn't surrender because he was afraid to die.
No, not at all. He surrendered because his people were starving. The buffalo were gone. The children were freezing to death. He saw the suffering to the elders and the babies, and he made the ultimate sacrifice.
He gave up his own freedom, his own soul, effectively, to save their lives.
It's the definition of the selflessness his vision demanded of him all those years ago. He lived humbly, and he gave up everything for the people.
He did. But the tragedy wasn't over. The story doesn't end with a quiet life on the reservation. The circumstances of his death are just chaotic and sad and pointless.
He gets to the agency, but he doesn't fit in.
How could he?
He's a living legend, which makes the other chiefs who had already surrendered, frankly, jealous. And he's quiet and intense, which makes the army officers paranoid. They're terrified he's going to stir up trouble and start another war.
And there are mistranslations.
Horrible mistranslations. At one point, he says he will go north and fight until not a Nez Perce is left. He was offering to help the army scout against a Nez Perce. But the interpreter messes it up and tells the army he said he would go north and fight until not a white man is left.
Oh no, a single mistranslated word. History turning on a dime.
Exactly. So in that atmosphere of paranoia and jealousy and fear, the order is given to arrest him. They try to put him in a guardhouse, a jail.
And remember who this is. This is the untamed spirit, the wild horse, the idea of a cage of iron bars. It was unbearable to him.
He pulled a knife, he resisted, he refused to be caged.
And in the struggle.
In the chaos of the struggle, while his arms were being held back by a little big man, fellow Lakota, a former friend who had joined the agency police, a soldier with a fixed bayonet thrust into Crazy Horse's back.
That irony is just crushing. The vision promised him protection from enemy bullets and arrows in battle, and in the end, he wasn't killed by a bullet in an open fight.
No.
He was killed by a bayonet in a confused scuffle while being held back by one of his own people.
It links back so perfectly and so tragically to the vision, the spiritual protection held up on the battlefield. The source says he was never touched by a bullet. But the world had changed so much that the danger wasn't on the battlefield anymore. The danger was in the confusion, the betrayal, and the confinement of the agency life he had tried so hard to avoid. The vision didn't protect him from politics.
He died later that night. His parents took his body. And this brings us to the final part of his legacy.
They carried him off into the Badlands, and they buried him in a secret location.
And to this day, nobody knows for sure where Crazy Horse is buried.
And honestly, that is exactly how it should be.
Why do you say that?
Because if we knew where he was, what would happen? We'd put a fence around it, we'd build a visitor center, we'd put up a plaque, we would sell tickets, we would turn him into a tourist attraction, we would try to own him.
We'd tame him in death.
We would. By remaining hidden, his resting place unknown, he remains part of the land. He remains the untamed spirit. He belongs to the earth, not to us.
The source describes him not just as a great warrior, but as a symbol of resistance, of dignity, and of devotion to a way of life. At the end of the day, it's the refusal to submit that really resonates, isn't it?
It is. In an era where everything was changing, where the pressure to conform was absolute, cut your hair, live in this square house, eat this government food, worship this foreign god, he stood like a rock. He said, no, this is who I am. This is who we are. And he was willing to die for that identity, that kind of integrity. It's rare in any century.
So let's just try to wrap this all up. We started with a shy boy named Curly watching the world from the sidelines.
We saw him traumatized by the Grattan massacre, seeking answers in a spiritual vision out in the wilderness.
We saw him rise as a tactical genius who humbled the U.S. Army at the Fetterman fight and again at Little Bighorn.
We saw him navigate the heartbreak of a personal scandal and the brutal, messy reality of tribal politics.
And finally, we saw him sacrifice his own freedom, the thing he valued most, to save his people from starvation.
He was a man who saw the future. He saw the repeating rifles, he saw the end of the buffalo, he saw the waves of settlers. He knew the odds, and he chose to fight anyway.
His life is a testament to the idea that the outcome isn't the only thing that matters.
No, losing doesn't make you wrong. How you live, how you fight, and how you die. That matters just as much.
That is a powerful place to leave it. But before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over. We talked a lot about how Crazy Horse turned down the safety of the agency, the guaranteed food, the warmth for the danger of freedom.
He chose the cold over the cage.
He chose the cold over the cage.
Right.
And in our modern world, we are constantly offered that same deal in smaller ways. We're offered safety, we're offered convenience. Give us your data, and we'll make your life easier. Stay in the safe lane at work. Don't rock the boat.
We trade little bits of our privacy, our autonomy, and sometimes our principles for security.
It raises the question, what is the price we are paying for our own safety, for our own comfort?
It's a big question.
And if it really came down to it, would you ever have the courage to walk away from the warmth of the agency and into the cold, just to be free, like Crazy Horse did? It's a scary question, but I think it's one worth asking.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll catch you next time.